When analyzing a company, it's important to evaluate the corporate governance policies and procedures of that company. Now, this is important because all else equal, a company which has effective corporate governance is likely to outperform a company with weak corporate governance. Now, this means that analysts often make adjustments to the cost of capital or the risk premium based on their evaluation of corporate governance policies and procedures. If an analyst determines that a particular company has effective or strong corporate governance, then the risk premium associated with that company will be relatively low. On the other hand, all else equal, if we have a company with weak corporate governance, then the risk premium for that company will be relatively high. If we take this in terms of cost of capital, then for the company with effective or strong corporate governance, the cost of capital will be relatively low, whereas for a company with weak corporate governance, the cost of capital will be relatively high. Another point highlighted in the curriculum has to do with shareholder activism. This refers to strategies that shareholders might employ to influence a company to act in a certain way. So, for example, if a company has weak corporate governance, let's say the transparency is low, the board of directors is not independent, so shareholders might try and change the corporate governance policies to make them more investor friendly. That would be an example of shareholder activism. This segment of the curriculum has 3 subsections. In 3.1, we will look at how to evaluate board policies and practices. Then we will look at executive remuneration or compensation, and then we will look at shareholder voting rights. With respect to board policies and practices, the most fundamental point has to do with how well is the board looking after the interests of the shareholders. So, in simple terms, we have shareholders who own the company. We have the board which represents the shareholders and oversees management. So, the board needs to ensure that management is acting in the best interest of shareholders. In evaluating the board policies and practices, one of the first things an analyst should look at is the board of directors structure. So here a key question is whether the board is providing oversight, representation, and accountability to the shareholders. With respect to the structure, the analyst can look at whether the board has a 1-tier or a 2-tier structure. We talked about the fact that with a 1-tier structure, we have directors and independent directors, whereas with a 2-tier structure, we have a supervisory board and a management board, and the supervisory board is responsible for ensuring that the management board acts in the best interest of shareholders. From a testability perspective, all else equal, we can say that a 2-tier board is better for shareholders. Another factor to consider is CEO duality. There might be situations where the CEO is also the chairman of the board. Now, if this is the case, then we have CEO duality, and this is not a positive sign, because if the CEO is also the chairman of the board, then the interests of shareholders might be compromised and the interests of managers might be given more importance. So, in evaluating the board of directors structure, we need to look at whether CEO duality exists or not. If it does exist, then we need to check whether there is a lead independent director. The responsibility of the lead independent director would be to ensure that the principal agent conflict is minimized. The next aspect to consider is board independence. Now, as we've discussed, the board will have some members that are independent and other members that are not independent. So we might have senior executives such as the CEO, the CFO, they would be considered not independent board members, whereas we might have somebody who doesn't have any link with the company. That person would be considered an independent board member. Now, ideally, the majority of the board needs to be independent. So if we are evaluating a company and it turns out that the majority of the board is independent, then that would be considered positive. On the other hand, if we have a company where the majority of the board is not independent, then that would be considered negative. Next, we come to board committees. Now, the specific committees might vary from company to company or industry to industry, but generally, we will have some key committees such as the audit committee, the compensation committee. There will be a committee that selects the board of director members. Now, we need to ensure, or we need to look at whether these committees are sufficiently independent. Ideally, the majority of these committees needs to be made up of independent board members. If we have a situation where, let's say, the audit committee has mostly members who are not independent, and the compensation committee also has members who are not independent, then the concern here would be that these committees are more interested in the benefit of management rather than the best interest of shareholders. So the central point to look at with respect to board committees is whether they are independent or not. And this is particularly true for the governance-related committees such as the audit committee, the compensation committee, and the selection committee. Next, we have the board skills and experience. Now, ideally, we want a board which has the relevant skill set and experience. Now, this needs to be a board with the range of skills that are needed. So, if we have a company that is in the oil and gas sector, then obviously we need people who understand the oil and gas industry. We need people who understand the financial aspects. We will need people who understand ESG related matters concerning the oil and gas industry and so on. So we want the relevant skill set and experience. Now, in this case, if we have a very concentrated board, which means that all the people in the board have a similar skill set. So let's say we have people who primarily have a financial background, and even though that financial background is in the context of that particular industry in which this company operates, but that would be considered a concentrated board, and that is a negative. We want a board that has all the range of skill and experience that would be relevant for the company and more specifically for the role of the board of directors. With respect to experience, we often look at the tenure of the various board members, and generally if the tenure is more than 10 years, that's considered a long period of time. A long tenure could be negative or positive. It could be negative in the sense that somebody who's been there for a very long time might be too close to management and therefore might not properly look after the interests of shareholders. On the positive side, a long tenure might indicate that the person understands the industry very well and understands the corporate governance aspects that are relevant for that particular company. Next, we come to board composition, and here the key aspect is diversity. So we want a diversity of directors, and this diversity can be based on professional background, culture, geographical background, as well as gender, age, and tenure. Now, in this case, a lack of diversity might be that all our board members are white, from the same industry, have similar backgrounds, and are all in the 50 to 60 age group. So that would be something that we don't want. So the key point here is that when evaluating the board, if we see diversity, that is positive, and a lack of diversity would be considered negative. The final point on this slide has to do with board evaluation. Now, in some cases, the board might self-evaluate. In other cases, the board might engage an external entity to evaluate. And what we want here is to understand whether the board is performing its responsibilities to ensure the best interest of shareholders. Moving now to executive remuneration or compensation. From an analyst perspective, we need to look at the transparency of compensation. We need to look at the performance criteria for incentive plans. And we need to look at the criteria both for short-term compensation and the long-term. We need to look at the linkage of compensation with the company strategy. So the basic idea here is that compensation should be tied to company strategy and performance. If the company does well and the managers or executives receive better or higher compensation, that makes sense. But if the company is performing poorly, but senior management compensation is going up, that would be an issue. We also should look at the pay differential between the CEO and the average worker. And a metric that is used here is the ratio of CEO pay to average worker pay. If this ratio is too high or very high compared to the industry standard or the norms in a given region, then that would be a cause for concern. We need to also look at whether there is a say on pay provision and a clawback policy. A say on pay provision is where shareholders have a say on the pay of senior executives, especially the CEO. And a clawback provision has to do with where the CEO might receive a significant bonus, but then later on, if the company performance is not that good, then some of that money that has been paid as a bonus can be taken back by the company. Both say on pay and a clawback provision would be good from the perspective of shareholders. And when we are evaluating the executive compensation related policies, such provisions would be considered a positive. Shareholder voting rights also need to be considered. The most basic setup is straight voting share structures. So the idea here is one vote per share. But there might be situations where we have dual class share structures. So there might be class A shares with voting rights and class B shares that do not have voting rights. Or there might be a situation where class A shares have more voting rights than class B shares. And the point is that when evaluating shares, one needs to understand the voting rights of those shares. If the voting rights are lower than, let's say, class A shares, then that would be a negative.